Hello, I have finished a coffee table. So there's that. I finished the top with Odie's oil, which wasn't what I initially intended to do, but I'm glad I did. It's a very nice result. So here's how I did it. So I'm pretty sure that I have processed, which basically means sanded and tidied up the slab as well as I am going to. Now I've got some legs here. Hairpin. So this is not really a very vintagey type piece, obviously. It doesn't look like one. I suppose hairpins are pretty old. When did hairpin legs start being used? I don't know. Surely 20th century. Well, definitely 20th century, but surely the first half. I shall find out, and if I find out anything useful, I'll put it on the screen now. So I'm just kind of eyeballing where these things need to go. Now these legs come with this bag of wood screws. I'm not going to use those. I have my own method, which I think will be a bit more secure. Now there are some rubber feet to go on the bottoms of these, but I'll worry about those later. Okay. The method that I'm going to use to install these legs is I will drill holes, and in each hole I will insert one of these threaded inserts, and then I will be able to attach the legs with these bolts. They call them machine screws. At what point does something cross over from being a bolt to being a screw? When I drill these holes, I don't really want to go any deeper than is required. I'll just use a piece of tape on my drill bit as a marker. Now the wood is not hardwood, it's cedar, as you know. So before I actually put the inserts in, but after I've drilled all the holes, I'm going to be putting my coating on. The coating is an epoxy resin wood sealer, and one of the things that will do is penetrate and harden the surface, which I think will be good for these holes. Perfect. I'm just test fitting one of them. I know it's the right size, but I'm just demonstrating. This is the epoxy wood sealer from Resin Effects New Zealand, which is a company that sells a lot of, as the name might suggest, resin. And it's nice for simple folk like me because it's just a 1-to-1 ratio. Resin is expensive stuff, I find, and I don't know that there's a solution to that. It just is what it is. This particular product is not too bad. Epoxy sealer can be used just as a sealer rather than a finish to apply to wood to stop the subsequent coats from soaking in. So you would apply lots of this and then sand it flat and then apply on top of that whatever it is you were going to put on. But you can actually just build this up into a varnish in its own right. And I've done that before with a trestle desk that I've made, and it turned out nicely. So I would be quite happy if this table turns out, oops, making a terrible mess, just as nicely. This will darken the wood, but that's all right. Okay, I will come back in half an hour and put more on here, at which point it won't be dry, but it will be, mostly dry actually, because of the rate at which I can see this soaking in. And I said I would only apply a couple of coats, but what I'll actually do is just keep applying coats until what's in my container is all used up. So as it turns out, this is the fourth coat, and that's pretty much perfectly using up all of the remaining sealer, and it's got really good coverage now. So I've just gone over this with some 240 grit sandpaper, obviously not all the way through the finish, but I've taken all the small raised bits, the little bits of dust, any hair that might have landed on it, any little bumps or what have you. The result is a very nice satin feeling surface, and I'm just going to go over this now with one or two very light coats of epoxy, which will leave it nice and flat. Right, I'm going to take a different approach this time, using a foam roller, because it does produce a very smooth finish. I've changed my mind about finishing the top of this. For the bottom and for the sides, I've just got epoxy resin wood sealer on there, and that's doing a good job. It's acting as a sealant. It's providing lots of protection. It's quite a hard finish, and it looks okay. But I don't want the top to look okay. I want it to look beautiful if possible. You can apply an epoxy resin wood sealer to the top and build it up as a varnish, and then do the whole fine sanding and then wet sanding and then polishing, and maybe it would look beautiful. But that's really labor intensive, and I'm not opposed to doing that sometimes. But if you're going to be, as I'd like to be, making pieces that you'll sell, you'd like to avoid things taking forever to build, otherwise it's just not economical to do. And this is a product that I quite like. It's Odie's oil, and although it is an oil finish, it's the general type of oil finish called hard wax oil finishes. It does provide some protection. This was actually developed as a product to apply to hardwood floors, which should give you some idea of how hard wearing it is. I applied this product to our dining table in our home that we have been using for some years, and it holds up well, so I know it's a good product, and it looks really nice. So that's what I'm going to do. I've seen some reviews of this stuff. Some people love it, some people really don't like it, and of at least a couple of the ones who really don't like it, they don't use it very well. Like I was watching one just today to brush up on what people think of this stuff, and one guy was saying, look, I've applied countless coats of Odie's oil to the top of this table and I don't like it. Well, you're not if you're applying countless coats, you don't really know how to use it. There are instructions provided by the manufacturer. I've read them and used it that way, and it looks great when you do that, and that's what I'll be doing today. See if you can see what that looks like. You can kind of. Looks like a sort of mud. I stuttered there because like, should I be saying mud? Does it look like mud? Not really. But as you stir it up, it starts to get slightly warmer, and certainly as you're applying it, it becomes warm just from the warmth of your hand. You don't need to apply very much. So I'll just put a couple of fairly small splotches around the top. If we need more, we'll come back to the jar. It's difficult to get, well, it's not difficult to get this stuff in New Zealand, but anything you have to get from the States, postage is a killer, but it's just a very nice product. Now you apply it, get some things out of the way, you apply it with an abrasive pad. So I've got some synthetic steel wool here. It's, I forget how fine this is. It's probably quadruple, either triple or quadruple zero, fairly fine. And you use the pad to really work it in to the grain of the wood. But a little bit does go quite far. Just do the top initially, and then I'll come back and do the beveled top edge. Now you would normally, you can get away with, in many cases, just applying one coat. I think I'll do two, but you would never want to do more than that. So it was an immediate red flag when someone was saying, I've been applying countless coats of Odie's oil. You don't apply countless coats. So there is a bit of elbow grease involved, and the larger the surface, well, the more work. As you can see, the coverage that has provided, that was a really small amount, just a couple of little blobs. So I'm going to have more than enough here. Right, that'll do for now. There are still lots of excess sitting on the surface, of course. I'll come back, I don't know, there's no prescribed amount of time. I'll come back in maybe half an hour, buff this, and then do it again. Now that looks so much better than any epoxy resin timber sealer would have looked. Odie's oil retains a very natural look. I mean, it does colour the wood. You can see that something is on it, and you can certainly feel that something is on it. But it doesn't alter the colour radically, it just darkens it a little. Okay, so there is one final step in the finishing process here. Here it is, that same vintage wax that I use on lots of things. For now I'm just rubbing down any excess, taking it off, but I'm pretty much done here now. And if it needs wiping when I turn it over, that's fine. Okay, it's time to put some legs on this. Looks great, but that took ages. I'm going to see if I've got a bit for my drill that will do that. One of these holes appears to be slightly incorrectly aligned. Alright, this one's a bit better. See, that one only allows 2 bolts to go in. It could be those 2 or those 2, but not both pairs. Ah, dear. Dear, oh dear. I mean, you won't know while you're using it, but I don't like that. Okay, so that one will only take 2. Bother. Now this thing should have room to stand on my bench. And there it is. Finished. I think it's lovely. It doesn't rock. That's a plus. Yeah. I'm always going to be thinking now about the fact that I know underneath not all the bolts went in, especially that leg that has 2 bolts. Because this is not for my home, I want to sell it. So now, when I do, I'm going to be like, hey, look, just be aware that this leg only has 2 bolts. And they'll be like, whoa, really? Well, it ain't worth what you're asking, mate. We'll have to take off $150,000, you know, whatever. But it's nice. It is the kind of thing I would happily have in my home. But I won't, because it doesn't really fit my home. So, that's a project finished off. It's nice to finish off a project. Do come back for the next one. What will that be? Well, I've got a few things that I want to do next. I haven't actually started building anything next, but I've got a few things, and you're going to find out about them very... Well, I don't want to promise anything. I don't want to say very shortly, but you will find out about them soon. Yeah, it's like a date that's awkwardly winding up where we don't know how to say goodnight. And then eventually what happens is one super short update. I knew that I wasn't going to be happy with any of these legs just having 2 bolts. So what I did is I went around all of the legs and drilled out the holes just 1 millimeter larger. And now, so I wasn't able to get 4 bolts in all of them. But now that one that only had 2 can at least accommodate 3 bolts. And that's, I mean, it felt secure before, but I feel better about that now.